Hello everyone, it seems recently I've been examining the predecessors to our current Artemis program with SLS and Starship Super Heavy in order to get back to the moon, and that's partly because our moon program is somewhat up in the air. Maybe Blue Origin with Blue Moon is going to play a part, maybe the Chinese are going to beat us, maybe we'll have a NASA administrator finally. Jarek Isaacman has once again been proposed, but he's been in this place before, so I don't know if he's going to get confirmed. Well, I mean, presumably, but who knows? And who knows what's going to happen with that, because the OMB is dead set on cutting NASA's budget. So, yeah. We're in this place, and a lot of the stuff that has gotten us into this place has absolutely nothing to do with the hardware. But I'm here to look at the hardware. I will continue examining the possibilities, and in the comments to the Jupiter rocket video, somebody suggested Shuttle C. It was Eric Popcorn, and Eric Popcorn suggested this particular paper, a near-term, high-confidence, heavy launch vehicle, heavy lift launch vehicle. And, well, we all like high confidence. However, I feel like it's a bit of marketing, and I'll be the judge of this. I have a degree in history, so I look at papers rather skeptically, generally speaking. I'm not in the sciences, and in history, we argue a lot. Already I'm going high confidence, huh? Anyway, what is Shuttle C? Shuttle C is this puppy. So it's taking the shuttle and converting it into a cargo vessel. And there are many different iterations of this, some of which you can sort of see. We've got a 3-engine version, a 2-engine version, and there's some versions that will have a detachable pod in the back, some versions that don't. Some of it's just completely disposable. I don't like the completely disposable version. So that's Shuttle C for you. There's this version of Shuttle C where instead of making it sort of plane shaped, it's got the detachable pod in the back and then a huge fairing, and that's to help with things going to a higher orbit. So there's these variants, but personally, I have my own preferred way of looking at it. But let's take a look at this paper and see what it has to say for itself. Now, this was part of the proposals during the Constellation era, so contemporary with the Jupiter program and Constellation and all of that, which ultimately, Constellation won, and then it turned out that they didn't want to fund it properly. The Bush administration at the time did not give enough money, and the Obama administration afterwards realized there wasn't enough money, so then they had to come up with an alternative that was cheaper. So here we've got the President Bush announced a vision for space exploration to return Americans to the moon by 2020. Oh, well. So we have this 90-day study, the Exploration Systems Architecture Study, and this is trying to provide a high-confidence, heavy lift launch vehicle for that. We've got this example of a Shuttle C configuration, and this industry NASA Team Concept B shuttle-derived launch vehicle. This one has a larger fairing. You'll note that it looks very different on the back end than the other one because it doesn't have the OMS pods. This one did have the OMS pods. So this is just going through the history of it here, and payloads to low Earth orbit of up to 60 metric tons were examined. So the idea is that if you take off the wings, if you take out the crew module and all the excess stuff that won't be necessary for this configuration, then this can get 60 tons to low Earth orbit. So that's pretty good, and that is a heavy lift launch vehicle. So we've got that. However, the approach fell out of favor because of budgetary pressures at the time. Still budgetary problems. Now, they're talking about the historical situation. This concept was studied in the 1980s. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, why are they proposing it again, given that it's fallen out of favor, right? Given the budget. So indicates that the only side mount SDVs described were of this Shuttle C variety, where the entire cargo carrier is placed into orbit by the SSME main propulsion, in essence flying a shuttle-type mission with the orbiter replaced by expendable cargo carrier. So here we have expendable cargo carrier, right? So presumably they're noting that because they're going to object to the expendable part and try to recover this, but that's just my guess, reading it along the way. So sorry about this being just reading a paper, but the reason I want to look at this is because I have to decide whether I want to make a model of what they're going to propose. So if they come up with a nice plan, maybe I'll make a model for it in Kerbal Space Program and try it out and use it. But we need to see whether they've got a good idea here or not. I'm not going to use the expendable version. So let's see. So, subsequent to industry team efforts, however, John Frasnito and Associates in 2006, so this is actually a little bit after the original process, re-examined Shuttle C operational approach of orbiting the entire payload carrier and SSME main propulsion. So are they going to end up with my shuttle mouse thing? Shuttle mice, if you haven't seen them, are basically little winged vehicles that carry the... imagine in the back of this, and this is my preferred configuration, by the way. Imagine in the back of this if you had a little winged vehicle carrying the 3 engines, and this would glide a bit in order to slow itself down, but ultimately it's safer to parachute it down. It'll aim for the right location, but instead of trying to make a runway landing, because it's not got that much lift, and it's got really heavy engines inside, it would just then parachute down once it's gotten into the right location. So we'd have a winged vehicle in the back, but it'd be relatively small, and then we'd have the structural extension to the front. So that's sort of my shuttle mouse thing, and also I've used shuttle mice on the sides of SLS in order to recover the engines like that. So SLS would have engine recovery at least. We could also use the ULA Smart approach where we recover the engines like that with a huge balut or something. But I still don't know how to make a balut necessarily in Kerbal Space Program. People have made balutes, but personally I'm not entirely sure. So we'll set that aside for now. It was noted that the Ares 5 stages the Earth departure stage suborbitally, right, and utilizes that stage in 2 distinct steps to attain a low Earth orbit as well as conduct translunar injection. This is very similar to the S4B stage on Saturn V. So yes, the Earth departure stage completes orbit. The ESAS report, however, does not depict a similar suborbital stage approach with propulsion recovery module for the SDV as shown in Figure 3. So here we have their Figure 3, suborbital staging shuttle-derived vehicle with recoverable propulsion avionics module. So they've got this new recovery module here, and my first objection is the engine nozzles are going to get fried, right? I mean, let's see if they've got a solution for that, but that doesn't look like a pod of any kind, right? And so we're going to have a balut somewhere, hopefully, or some sort of inflatable heat shield, because otherwise this thing is going to get smoked. And so they've put the upper stage inside this cargo carrier, and that's my second objection to this. We would like not to have the extra structure. If we could design it so that our upper stage is the structure, and in particular also is capable of transferring the thrust from the engines to where it needs to go, which is the intertank, that would be ideal. If we do not, and I've mentioned this before, it's the intertank part up here that bears the thrust of the boosters and the engines. So if we want to make this work, we need some replacement for all the structure of the orbiter. We can't just have the little thing in the back and not transfer that thrust to this location here. So the orbiter is very rigid and strong because it has to deal with aerodynamic forces and reentry. So it does transfer the force very well, but it's also heavy. Here we have what amounts to a fairing around the new upper stage. And so we've got something that's potentially strong, the upper stage, but then something that's potentially weak, the fairing around it. And the result of that is that they have to maybe strengthen the external tank, or they have to make that extra fairing stronger. They are pointing same external tank here, so they're saying that, but do they mean it? So let's see. These are, while you're reading, you should come up with these questions that you're going to try to answer by reading further. So the following important changes occur in a lunar launch architecture when a suborbital staging SDV is included in the comparisons with the recommended architecture. So this is the organization that's coming up with the idea. I wonder how much money they got for it. Anyway, suborbital staging of the payload carrier, release of the upper stage and payload, followed by the first burn of the upper stage to place the attached payload in orbit, significantly improve the payload capability of the system by 78 metric tons. And this is obvious. What you have done is you have reduced the burden on the external tank fuel and the engines. So we've got now a sort of 2.5 stage configuration, but most of the work to get to orbit is still done by the external tank and the SSMEs, which is sort of fine because they're just overwhelmingly efficient engines. The RL-10s are better, but still, by only a little bit. And the external tank is going to provide 6,000, 7,000 meters per second to orbit. The booster is about 1,000, 1,500 in this configuration. So then the new upper stage is going to do the rest. And that's still overusing the external tank, but any amount that you can cut down on using the external tank will be to the benefit of your payload capacity. Because really what you're supposed to be getting out of the SSME is about 4,500 meters per second. So any amount that you can use the upper stage instead, you're going to get some benefit. So they get a substantial benefit of so that it's now 78 tons, 12 metric tons larger than the quoted figure by the original study for the same orbit. Determined that for the masses of the LSAM and CEV elements, these are the actual payloads for lunar exploration missions presently being considered. This suborbital staging variant of the side mount SDV provides the necessary payload improvements to permit current reference lunar exploration missions to be conducted using only 2 launches. So basically they would be sending one element with an upper stage on one launch and another element in a different launch, which is my preferred thing. So you would have the crew vehicle that's going to come back on one launch and then the lander on a different launch. Well, at least that's my preferred way of doing it. And then I generally do lunar orbit rendezvous. And as far as all of our current plans go, it's all doing lunar orbit rendezvous. It's all about Orion meeting up with Starship, Orion meeting up with Blue Moon, and trying to do that stuff. So it's basically the same thing. It has to be 2 launches minimum. And that's because, I mean, people would object, okay, well, Apollo was 1 launch. Yeah, but that was as small and tight and dangerous as we will possibly get. So we wanted to be a little bit safer than Apollo and somewhat more comfortable. People doing the study determined that the side mount SDVs can be used to support crew transfer and logistics to the International Space Station. No, let's not. But okay, fine. So why is this, oh, we can use it for the ISS thing a problem? Well, first of all, I want to redesign this front portion so that it's only got the upper stage instead of having all this extra structure around it. And if we do that, then how are we going to have this ISS version? For the ISS, maybe we should just use the orbiters. But I mean, they were trying to retire it. That's what they're saying there. Maybe they're thinking about sending full modules, and then you would need the extra structure. So we're going to talk more about this once I start designing it. Another objection to this format is, are we going to be launching the crew with the crew vehicle for the moon in this? Because if we are, it needs the launch escape system. You can't have that nose there. And so you'll have the capsule on top and everything. So once again, I don't want this fairing like this. So, and that's going to lead to, aerodynamic complications, and they're going to have to certify the aerodynamics of it. But that's, once again, one of those unavoidable things, I think. Otherwise, we'll have to have another vehicle transferring the crew to the crew vehicle when it's in orbit. So we'll have to take a little Dragon up or something, and then it'll dock to the crew vehicle, and then that's a third launch. So anyway, further, these SDVs utilize existing 4-segment SRBs, external tanks, so they're going with existing here. So that means we're going to need the thrust transferring structure to be part of this pod here. Okay, because the orbiter is removed from the launch system, significant reductions in processing time and recurring costs are possible. Yeah. So a lot of the time that's taken for the orbiter is, well, I mean, there's the tiles for recovery, but it's mainly to do with the fact that we're launching crew on it. But then if we're launching crew on this, it'll probably take the same kind of time because we're going to be careful with the crew. Similar to the present STS, well, similar is a strong word for what we've got here. This fairing is looking bigger and bigger by each new image, isn't it? Here's the catch here. See this strengthened ET? Wait a minute. You said that we were going to have the same ET, right? Same external tank. Oh, now you're going to say we're going to have a strengthened external tank. Why do they need this? Well, because this fairing thing isn't as strong as the actual shuttle. So there's a flaw. They're sort of redesigning the external tank on the sly here. But they only say it in this little bit right here. Let's see if they say it in a text somewhere. Rotating service structure would require modifications to match the 7.5 meter diameter payload carrier. So now you've got ground structure changes, right? Because we've got this now very large thing on top here. 7.5 meter diameter payload carrier for the SDV. Relatively minor modifications to work platforms in the VAB. Well, probably they're minor. Modifications of existing facilities for processing the payload carrier and recoverable propulsion avionics module will be required. Well, that's fair enough. That's the price of trying to recover it. So the phase launch, very similar. Yes, I would expect that. And they say that they're going to go to 63 nautical miles altitude when basically the shuttle hovers around there before it does the OMS burns anyway. And then jettison, payload carrier, EDS stage engine ignites and burns for more than 6 minutes to achieve orbit. And actually that's for the preliminary orbit. So they're using the EDS a lot, and therefore it's probably the case that they're trying to use the external tank and the SSMBs for something more like the optimal amount. So maybe I was overestimating with the 6,000, 7,000. They seem to be using for less if it's going to burn for that long. Either that or they're using a very weak engine on the EDS stage, but I thought it was going to be a J2X. It is a J2X. So for that long a burn, first of all, they're pushing the burn time on the J2X quite long, because that's just to get to orbit, and then they have to transfer to the moon. So that's 6.5 minutes to get to orbit, and it's going to take maybe 5 minutes burn to get to the moon. So they're using all the burn time. Meanwhile, the recoverable propulsion unit will make a near ballistic entry. It's actually, if they're taking that long to get to the moon, it's in one of those dodgy sort of situations. Where is it even going to land? Let's see, it's going to land in a rather inconvenient place. Atlantic Ocean, 1,100 nautical miles from the launch site. So that's a bit far out. And the Atlantic Ocean is not always nice about things. In other words, it could be stormy and stuff like that. But, okay. Human lunar missions, design reference mission 1. So here they're going over. Now, they haven't really given us a whole lot of detail on the timing of everything, but we've got enough that we could make it work out. So here we've got design reference mission 1, but Some of my questions have not been answered. Let's see if we can get some. This is the ISS logistics resupply. So they're showing, here's the launch escape system. So we know we have to have the launch escape system. But you take a look at this, and doesn't it occur to you that A, we have a very big fairing, and it doesn't need to be that wide. B, that fairing is a lot of extra structure compared to what's actually going inside of it. And see, it's still not doing all the job of transferring the energy to the interstage because they want to strengthen the external tank. So I think there's two things. One, I am not confident that they've got the recovery of the rear end proper because the engines are sort of exposed and I haven't seen a bloot yet. And B, I think the front end, maybe we should make it more integral structured so that the stage is actually helping to transfer the energy instead of having this extra fairing. And that's my current assessment of this and how I'll think about redesigning this. So we can think about that. And that's why the original versions that we see up here, sort of look like the shuttle, right? They have the cargo bay doors, but I don't even want the cargo bay doors per se. I just want the structure. The ISS logistics I'll set aside for now. Estimated payload of 45 metric tons with a Centaur stage inside. So it seems like it's trying to push an ISS module, a crew module, and then the Centaur stage. This is a lot. Anyway. And they're trying to use this cargo carrier as agnostic thing. In other words, for the ISS missions, you'll have it. And then for the lunar missions, you'll still have it. So it's the same module, so that seems to make it, easy. However, there's two of them, isn't there? There's this one, and then this one's shorter because it has to accommodate the launch escape system. So already there's that going on too. But we'll think about how to improve upon this. Solar power, satellite development and deployment missions, heavy lift exploration missions, yeah. Oh, here we go. So here we have the lunar configuration. And what you see is upper stage is the Earth departure stage in more of, instead of like the Jupiter system where it's a shared bulkhead tank, we've got separate tanks for the hydrogen and oxygen. This is more like the EUS on SLS, but larger because we've got a larger engine here. And it almost takes up the fairing. So you wonder here, right, looking at this, if, they have it sitting on the nozzle, but if you had, instead of this, you see a frame around the nozzle right there, right? If instead of having this frame here, you actually had the frame down below here so that it was meant to convey the thrust of the engines down to the inner tank, like this. Right here, this top part of the hydrogen tank can almost reach the inner tank. So as long as you had the right structure back here, you could probably convey the thrust of the SSMEs all the way down to here. So I think redesigning this back part and then leaving off the fairing as it is, instead of having the fairing around the entire thing, just have the fairing on top of the stage, right? So the fairing will just be this top part, and same over here. And then you'll save some mass like that that can be used for the structure that you need to convey the thrust. And so that's what I would suggest. I don't know whether the tanks are meant to bear the thrust of the SSMEs. I'm just saying straight up build a structure to bear that thrust. And that structure hopefully will be comparable to the mass of the fairings that we're discarding. So that is the goal. And the purpose of this is to avoid redesigning the external tank at all. Because right now I'm looking at it and I'm going, and they have said strengthen the external tank too. you're probably going to need to do some work on that. Okay, so we've got the, now we've got the masses, so that's good. So I can use this and just plug the numbers in. And so my remaining question is, how are we bringing this module in the back down? Okay, so here's the propulsion avionics module. I'll link this in the video description, by the way, of course. We've got flaps to add drag. But I think that's still, I mean, that'll work. But it's, I noticed that oh no, they did have them on that one. Okay, they have the flaps on all of them. I'm just checking that they've been consistent. Okay, so they have these flaps. Final descent is on 3 main parachutes, so they're not using a bloot system or anything like that. They're relying on these flaps to be enough to create drag. I don't know if that's enough. And it'll go nose first, and so they've got this having heat protection, I'm sure, and it's curved like this, so that's good. But it's still not convincing me that this is, you know, pod shaped, and there's not enough area down here considering how heavy the SSMEs are. But anyway, maybe we can just straight up try this and see what happens. In other words, I can make something like this for sure. Transition plans and risks I'm not going to go over, and the development and recurring costs will be inevitably optimistic. In conclusion, the use of well-understood legacy elements of the space shuttle system, oh, there we go again. I'm telling you, it didn't work out that well, we know now, but could yield a near-term high-confidence heavy-lift launch vehicle that offers significant performance, reliability, schedule, risk, cost, and workforce transition benefits. And the side-mount shuttle-derived vehicle concept has been defined that has major improvements over the previous Shuttle C concepts. Okay, so again, the other Shuttle C would go all the way to orbit, and I will agree with them that, of course, that's not the optimal thing if your goal is to get as much to orbit as possible. In fact, even SLS doesn't complete orbit with the core stage. In some cases, it boosts to a high apoapsis and leaves the periapsis low, and then the ICPS completes orbit, but it does get an extra boost out of it. By replacing the shuttle orbiter with a new cargo carrier using suborbital staging, this optimized SDV could deliver up to 78 metric tons payload to low Earth orbit. So my main thing is to design the carrier, redesign the carrier so that it does the job that the shuttle did in order to convey the SSME thrust. And my concern is brought about by the strengthened ET mention here. So maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's one thing. And the other thing is that the carrier should just make use of the upper stage that we have. And therefore, it's not going to be agnostic so that we can do ISS logistics. We're just going to say, this is overkill for ISS logistics. That's just it. We're going to say that that is not the purpose of this thing. Whenever they try to make something do more than one thing, they end up making it inefficient. And I think the whole fairing that we've got here is due to the fact that they're trying to make it do multiple tasks. And if we just have it do the already very arduous task of getting over to the moon, then we'll have it more focused and we'll have a much more efficient system. So that's the idea. I mean, after all, Saturn V was designed for one thing, and it does that job really well. And then if you said, well, let's also use it to deliver stuff to ISS, well, they did use it as, you know, for Skylab once, but you know, that's it. It wasn't really meant for that. So anyway, that's my take on this particular version of Shuttle C. and I'll let you folks tell me what you think about this. Maybe you think that the original Shuttle C is better. Maybe we should just have a shuttle that doesn't have the crew compartment and carry payload like that. All right, so that's it. That's a very long discussion of this particular version of the Shuttle C idea, and hopefully people like this sort of thing, I'm not sure. So with that, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time.